So, John, if you could manage any one band or singer throughout history, who would you choose and why?
I think Elton John.
Elton John? God, he sounds like a handful.
No, he seems easy to work with. Yeah.
Some films are fine just the way they are. Other films sometimes take it way too far. But really, how hard could it get? Let's go beyond the box set.
Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Box Set, a podcast where we pitch prequels, sequels, and spin-offs to films that don't have any. I'm Harry, and joining me as always is John.
Hello.
And John, we've got a guest on this week.
We do. We have another guest. It's time for our monthly Patreon episode. So we're joined today by one of our very generous supporters, Julio Oliveira from the Contrarians podcast. Thanks for joining us, Julio.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. I got to take off from work early so I could come record for you guys. So it's a good day already.
Oh, great.
Fantastic. Happy to facilitate that. So.
Yeah, good work.
And so obviously, whenever we have a guest on, we always let the guest choose a film. So what film have you chosen for us this week, Julio?
Well, we chose together. I think it's a group effort. I had a list of 4 potentials, and we landed on That Thing You Do. Yes. Extended edition.
Yeah, because that was the only edition I could find. So, so yeah, there is a version of this that isn't 2.5 hours long, Harry, but unfortunately,
right.
couldn't find that one.
Sure.
So.
Can I just ask, what were the other 3 options?
So it was Office Space, War Machine, which is a Netflix movie that not many people have seen.
Sure.
And then there was one more. I think Office Space and That Thing You Do were like the 2 main ones. That Thing You Do came up because you guys did that musical that everybody loves, La La Land.
Yes.
And in your La La Land episode, it felt like neither of you really knew who Tom Everett Scott was.
Yeah.
And I was just shocked because anybody that's seen That Thing You Do obviously goes crazy when Tom Everett Scott shows up at the end of La La Land. I mean, after watching this movie, I think that his cameo in La La Land has a lot more weight.
Yes.
It's probably the only part that I really like in the
definitely.
movie.
Absolutely.
You know, he's just like in a jazz band. It's awesome. I was so pumped when he showed up in La La Land, and I was looking around to see if anybody else in the theater recognized him, and of course nobody did because That Thing You Do. I mean, it's kind of a cult classic by now, but it's not really a very well-known movie, I don't think.
But yeah, it's certainly connected a lot of dots for me watching this movie, especially with La La Land.
I barely connected any dots with this. I saw Tom Everett Scott and I was like, this guy looks really familiar. Where do I know him from? And then for ages I was just like, oh my God, he's the little boy in Big, isn't he? He's the guy who turns into Tom Hanks. Because they look similar, all right? They do.
They do look ridiculously similar. That's the first thing I noticed, is that he really looks a lot like a young Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I was thinking like, oh, it's Tom Hanks is sort of giving this guy a break. That's nice.
He looks more like Tom Hanks than Colin Hanks, who's Tom Hanks' actual son.
Yeah. But apparently I was reading up about this film, and apparently Tom Hanks initially was resistant to casting him because he felt he'd looked a bit too similar to him. But then Tom Hanks' wife, Risa Wilson, said, no, he's cute, cast him. So, so she clearly has a type.
She's in the movie, too.
She is in this movie.
Who does she play in this?
She plays Marguerite, the waitress at the jazz bar, who looks like Jessica Rabbit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was Marissa Tomei for ages.
She does look a little bit like Marissa Tomei. Yeah, I can see
Is
that.
it me, or are there a lot of people in this film who look just slightly like other people?
Yeah, no, that's very
Or
true.
is it just me?
No, I think you're right. There are.
Well, it depends on how you feel about Steve Zahn. For the longest time, I always thought Steve Zahn looked like Michael J. Fox.
Oh, yeah.
Ah.
Well, I also thought that the guitarist looks a lot like Josh Hutcherson. Mm-hmm. And then the bass player in one shot, I was like, wait, is that Jim Parsons from The Big Bang Theory? So there's just so many people in this film. They're just not quite.
Who you think they are now?
Yeah.
I agree with the Jim Parsons comparison, but to me, Jimmy looks more like, or at least back in the day, he used to remind me of Joaquin Phoenix. Not anymore, because I think they've diverged in their looks, but
Sure, yeah.
an angry Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, I was kind of confused by the ages of the band. Just to recap a little bit, so this film stars Tom Everett Scott, Steve Zahn, and 2 people whose names escape me, as a young band in the 1960s who have this one record that's really, really catchy, and it ends up becoming a hit. And the film kind of just follows them as their song kind of takes off and hits the charts, and they just have a lot of fun. Alongside the singer-songwriter Jimmy, his girlfriend is played by Liv Tyler, and she kind of follows them around. We'll get to her, yeah. And she kind of folloes them around.
You guys, don't tell me you're going to hate on Liv Tyler.
I thought she was charming, but we'll get to it. But yeah, the band, I felt like the guy who played Jimmy could have been anything from like 27 to 43. He seemed like he was in his mid to late 30s. Like,
I think that's a bit harsh. I mean, he certainly wasn't a teenager.
no, yeah, none of them were teenagers, but that's to be expected in these kind of films. But,
Yeah, but no, that's a bit harsh.
Okay.
I think they're supposed to be early 20s because, and I used to think that they were like straight out of high school. I think the first time I watched it a long time ago, but rewatching it recently, they can't be because, you know, they're drinking and obviously they have way too much independence to be actual teenagers. And then I realized there is a moment, it's more clear in the extended version when they address that guy, the drummer, he was in the military. So he has to have been at least like, you know, a few years abroad. I think he mentioned he was stationed in Germany and something like that. So they have to be at least early 20s, mid 20s.
That does make more sense, I guess. So yeah, I hadn't seen that film before. I guess you hadn't seen this either, Harry.
No,
So what did you think of it?
I've really enjoyed it.
Good.
I think my favourite bit about it was sort of in the first third of the film where they're sort of just starting out as a band, and the main guy, what's his name? The main guy's name?
In the film, Guy? And is it Guy?
Yeah,
It's a guy.
Okay.
Yeah, so Guy's working in this hardware store run by his family, and they just seem to not be up for him going for a life of music instead of working on the shop at all.
Yeah, the father's not supportive at all, is he?
Yeah, and for a while, that's the way it was, and it looked like it was going to be, you've got to choose music or your life, and we don't support you if you go and run away in a band. And I was like, oh, I feel like I've heard this story a million times before. But then when he did go and run away with the band, his family were completely supporting him and just like tuning in at every sort of radio appearance and TV appearance and everything, and it was just really fun to see that. And also the drummer who broke his arm.
Yeah.
Like, I thought there was going to be a bit in the film where he's just super bitter about the whole thing, but he never was.
He's just fine, yeah.
And I really like that because
Yeah, I feel
it
really
would have felt
bad
a bit
for
samey
him.
otherwise, I think.
Yeah. Oh, they treat him like dirt. I felt terrible for that guy.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, he's just like part of the family, part of Guy's family, because it looks like they've adopted him. He's working at the store and he's having dinner with them, watching TV. So I guess it's not that bad for him at the end, but he has to feel so bad knowing that could have been him, you know,
Yeah.
with those guys up there on TV.
We have a big proposition for you, Guy. You still playing percussion?
I told you he was, didn't I?
Yeah. Every day.
We need you, Sketch.
How about sitting in for Chad just for tonight?
Why? Asshole. Just broke his arm.
There's not really any conflict in this film up until like maybe right at the end. Like everyone's broadly happy and getting on and having a good time. Like for most of this film, like there's not a lot of conflict there, which is but it gets by on just pure charm, and it's just really fun to watch. It's like there's something you said for just watching people having a good time for 2 hours. Like everyone just seems to be in a really good mood throughout this entire film.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more noticeable in the extended version because obviously it's longer, so there's a lot more stretches of them just having fun. I think the original, the theatrical version, it moves so fast and it's just so joyous. I think it just builds up a lot better. You don't really have time to really just get off the high of how well they're doing. So it's just a lot of fun seeing them having fun. You know, when you add the extra 40 minutes, when you go past the 2 hour mark, that really wears you down. I think you need more conflict to keep that going. And really, other than Jimmy being kind of an ass and becoming more and more of an ass throughout their tour, there's really not that much. I mean, like you said, I guess you have the subplot with Guy's girlfriend, Charlize Theron.
Baby Charlize Theron. How young does she look in this? My God. Like,
She was almost unrecognizable.
Yeah.
Great.
I think that's the first time I saw her in anything. And of course, when I saw her, I didn't think that's Charlize Theron, but more like next time I saw her in something else, I was thinking, oh, that's the girl from That Thing You Do.
Yeah, she's come a long way. You're more familiar with the regular theatrical version then. Was that a plotline that was more added in the extended cut then?
Yes, 100%. The two main difference in the extended version is the Charlize Theron character has a lot more scenes in the extended version. In the original, you see her only at the very beginning, and they don't even have that first big scene where she's talking about them being together for a year and asking about the store or anything. You just see her, I think, talking on the phone with him, and then when he shows up for his first show, and then she kind of disappears from the movie. From the moment that they go on tour, you never cut back to her doing stuff with the dentist or anything. So she's just gone. And then the other thing that they do is just, there's a lot more basically scenes that are in the original cut. In the extended cut, they just have, let's say, a couple minutes before and a couple minutes after, where they start much earlier and they end much later. And it's good stuff. Like if you've watched the original, like I do, and I love it, you just enjoy it because it's just like extra stuff. But really, one of my main concerns when I was watching it was like, I'm enjoying it, but I wonder if John and Harry are just bored out of their minds because it's just taking
not at
forever. The one thing that I think that the extended version does better, just because it has so much more buildup, is when you get to the Del Paxton scene in the jazz club. It really, I think it hits a lot harder. In the original version, you're moving so fast that suddenly it feels a little jarring when you get to Del Paxton. I don't know, maybe it felt jarring for you guys here in the extended version too. It feels like it's just suddenly Guy by himself after you've had him surrounded by the band the entire time. And there's just like, I don't know, 5-7 minutes of just him and jazz and talking to his jazz idol. I don't know, how'd that scene work for you guys?
Well, that was when I started thinking, oh God, he's Ryan Gosling in La La Land. It's like, oh no, Emma Stone's just repeating the same mistakes. So that just immediately made me laugh because I did recognize him from La La Land and thought, oh God, it's the whole jazz thing again. Yeah, I'll agree with you though. It did feel like the extended cut, being the only version of the film I saw, it did feel like every scene went on for quite some time. Like there were noticeably long scenes. Like that scene in particular, he's in that jazz bar with Reese Wilson and Del Patterson for a solid 7 to 8 minutes, I think. So
Yeah, it's a long time.
There's also a lot more of the at the end here in this one, which surprised me because I did not expect that. I was expecting all the other stuff, but here at the end, the movie ends in the original. He's jamming with Del Paxton, and that's the last thing you see. And then he goes to the hotel, and then he makes up with Faye. But here they show you him calling Clint Howard at the radio station, and then getting offered a job, and then he goes and interviews Del Paxton. They really kind of, it's almost like the extended version really wants you to be sure to know that he's gonna be okay. And in the original, it's more like, well, he got to jam with his idol, and then he got a girlfriend, and that should be enough.
Yeah.
Marguerite, what you got here?
Well, you may not believe this, Del, but this kid has heard of you.
That right? Look, sit down, buy me a drink. Del Paxton, who are you?
I'm Guy Patterson. I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm in a band called The Wonders, and we just cut a record. We're out here on the coast, and I play the drums, and I have all your records. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. But at least I did until some of them got swiped when I was stationed in Germany, and you were playing in Germany at the time that I was stationed there. But you know what? I couldn't see you because you were playing in Hamburg, and I was stationed in Munich. But I listened to your records, and I think you're great. You are my biggest fan.
Thanks. I'll have another Hennessy.
So yeah, but I mean, what is it about this film that you particularly like so much that it makes it such a standout film for you, Julio?
It's such a good time. You know, I love the music. I don't know if you guys got sick of hearing the titular tune because it plays like.
I was prepared to get sick of it, but I never did.
No, it wasn't actually overused that much considering how it's the only song they have, really.
So after a while, I realised they're like, oh, this is why the film's titled this. It's because it's only going to be about the one track.
Yeah.
And they play it again and again and again. And I was like, I'm going to get sick of this at any moment, but that moment never came. So whatever they did it well.
It helps that most of the times when they play it's under such different circumstances. So you have when they play it at their little competition, the first time they play together, and it's just the fun of like, oh, this guy just changed the tempo in the middle of the performance, and then you have him when you hear them on the radio for the first time, and then it's just like the euphoria of seeing them celebrate that they're on the radio for the first time, and then you hear them play it when they mess up the first time that they play into a big audience and they, the mics are not on and all that stuff. So every time it's like such a different experience. So I think that helps with the repetition. But going back to why I love it, it's just, I think it's really funny and I love the music and there's just that sense of joy. I don't know Tom Hanks, obviously I don't know him personally or anything, but I think that the movie captures what most of us would think of as the Tom Hanks persona. You know, you watch this movie and then you find out that it's directed and written by Tom Hanks and you're like, oh, of course, because Tom Hanks, he seems like such a nice guy and he would make this kind of wholesome celebration of just achieving your dreams, if only for, a few months. So it's really, it's just a total pleasure to watch. I don't think that it says anything deep about any of the things that it touches. It's not like it's any sort of deep expose of the music industry or a deep exploration of what happens when you put all your eggs in one basket. He quits his job and he really goes into this this venture of being a rock star for a few months, and then it all goes away just as quickly. But it's just that's all kind of incidental to just having fun with the ride, and I really, God, I love it. I am not much for
Really,
quoting
you
movies.
can't
Well, I'm not much for quoting movies, but this is one of those movies where, as I'm watching it, I can quote a lot of the lines and just feel really giddy with it. Like little things like the guy that's their fan, he comes up to them and he's like, "Hey, that's our fan." Just that little line is like, I find it really funny, and just stuff like that throughout the entire movie. But I'm curious about you guys. One of you at least groaned when we brought up Liv Tyler. So
That would be me.
is it just specific to this movie, or do you have a Liv Tyler bias?
I'm not sure if it's specific to this movie, but it's certainly accentuated in this movie, and it's just how boring she can be. I found her so boring in this, and it just reminded me of all the other Liv Tyler roles that she has just played the boring girlfriend. Because she's had this, she's had Armageddon, she's had The Incredible Hulk. Lord of the Rings is kind of the standout for me.
I can kind of see what you mean, because she does get stuck with playing the girlfriend quite a lot. And
Yeah,
she is
definitely.
I think she is quite a low energy kind of actress. Like,
Yeah.
she's not really full of beans kind of actress. But I found her quite charming in this, to be fair. I thought she was quite sweet, and it was so it was probably one of the cheesiest moments in the whole movie. But her little moment when she dumps Jimmy and she does that little speech and she says, "Oh, I wasted 1,000 kisses on you." I thought that was pretty sweet. I thought she did that really nicely.
Sweet's not really the word
Yeah,
I'd
that-
use for that scene. I mean, obviously that was a great scene, and she did it very well, and yeah, it was powerful. But for the rest of the film, I just didn't really care for
What about when the
for her character.
For her character, sure.
Perhaps,
But-
like, yeah, it might not be an actress thing, but
I also really liked her, though. I mean, she didn't have loads to do, but I also liked the scene where early on when they first hear the song on the radio and she's the first to hear it and she has this massive giddy scream and she runs around.
yeah.
And I thought that was very charming. Like,
yeah.
I think sweet is the right word to describe her. She's just, there's not much going on with her character, but really just her devotion to Jimmy, which I hadn't really, I mean, I always knew, but I think that's the main thing I took away from this rewatch, was just how devoted she is to him. Every time they cut to her seeing them perform, if you've seen the movie several times, it's easy to forget that she's not really that interested in Guy. I mean, they're friends and they have chemistry, but she really is devoted to Jimmy until the very end, which is why I guess, she has that heartbreaking moment at the end. But I think that takes talent to look that into someone that obviously is just an actor in the movie. I think that I guess you could say that she has a thankless role because she's not particularly funny. She's not given, like, everybody else gets to be funny in the movie, and she is just kind of there to be the girl that our protagonist is going to end up with. But for that part, I think she does really well. And I honestly, the million kisses or thousand kisses speech, that was my least favorite part of the movie. And then it's grown on me as time goes on. I think partly because I don't think it's her fault and I've learned to forgive. Just like, it's really cheesy, like you said. But there's also, I don't know, there's this sort of obsession with kissing in the last 10, 15 minutes of the movie. It's really weird. Like when she's having her final conversation with Tom Everett Scott, she asks him if his ex, if Charlize Theron if she was a good kisser, which is kind of a weird thing to ask. And then at the very end of the movie, he runs after her and he's like, "When was the last time that you were truly well kissed?" or something. It was just, I don't know. These are like people in their early 20s, and that seems like a conversation for younger people.
Yeah, it does. It feels a bit weird.
Also, Charlize Theron clearly isn't a very good kisser because, according to this movie, she has terrible, terrible teeth.
Very true. Very true.
Like, we're jumping around a bit, but those scenes, I know they were cut from the theatrical version, but the constant dental scenes made me really confused. I found them really entertaining, though, because it's like, is their relationship based around him doing dental work on her? Like, it felt like she was Bill Murray's character in Rocky Horror, not the Rocky Horror Picture, in the Little Shop of Horrors. Like, does she get off on people drilling her teeth? Like,
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
she keeps saying to Tom Everett Scott's character that, "Oh yeah, I've got to go to the dentist to get this crown work done." And I thought, oh, so she's making this excuse because she's having an affair with the dentist. But then every scene she's with the dentist, it seems like he really is doing dental work on her. So it was like, how much work is she getting done? Like, what is going on here?
Oh, this weekend.
You will not believe what I have to do. I'm getting the crown replaced on my number 15 molar. It's gonna take like all day tomorrow with the dentist.
All day? At the dentist?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like HE double toothpicks. Hon? Get it?
Man, I'm giddy.
That was one thing I've found about this movie in general, though, which I actually really enjoyed, was that it felt like, obviously, Tom Everett Scott's character is our protagonist, but it felt like every other character had their own kind of mini-movie going on that could, in itself, be its own film. Like, everyone had stuff going on that we were just seeing a little bit of that was really interesting. Like Liv Tyler, we only see her in a couple of scenes, but she's obviously got a lot going on, you know, with Jimmy that we don't really see, and also obviously all of the other members of the band. So obviously Jimmy, the singer's stressing out about recording another single. One of my favourite cutscenes by far is when the bass player, whose name I don't think gets a name in the film, does he? When he disappears, and they're like, "Where the hell's he gone?" And it just cuts. He's just gone to Disneyland with his new friends. Like,
and then he's never seen again.
and he's never seen again. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, this rewatch is the first time when I realized that it's not entirely his fault because Tom Hanks doesn't tell them that they have the TV show the next day until later that night, after he's already gone off with the army guys. You know, Tom Everett Scott's coming back from the jazz club all drunk, and then Tom Hanks stops him outside the hotel and tells him, "Hey, I wanted you to be the first to know you're on TV tomorrow, so make sure you gather your people," whatever. But by then, the bass player, he's already gone, so there's no way that he could have known. So it's really not 100% his fault that he just took off to Disneyland, because as far as he knew, there wasn't any pressing, you know, stuff that they had to take care of.
I just love the idea that he met some Marines in some bar and they were like, "Hey, let's go to Disneyland together."
Yeah.
It was...
Oh yeah, I mean, he's still an idiot.
But you're right, it is a bit irresponsible of Tom Hanks to just tell the guy who's clearly drunk out of his mind, hey, get the band together because in the morning, it's like 3 a.m. at this point. How long have they got to sort this out? Like,
yeah, and you know, that scene is not in the original. So in the theatrical,
really?
In the theatrical, he mentions that, you know, he's working on getting the TV stuff together. And then it doesn't come up again until he calls Tom Everett Scott in the morning. And it's like, "Where are you? You're supposed to be on TV in a few hours." So if you're watching the theatrical version, you just assume that, oh, they figured this out a long time ago and they're being really responsible. But the extended version, I guess, makes it clear that they just found out the night before.
I liked that scene because once again, Rita Wilson shows up because she drives Tom Everett Scott back to the hotel. And it seems like everyone knows everyone in this film. So she somehow she knows, even though she's just some waitress in a jazz bar, she knows Tom Hanks' character. And she's like, "Hey, I brought him back for you." And he's like, "Oh, great, thanks." Then just before she drives off, he kind of gives the biggest wink to her. And it made me laugh. It was obviously just like, "Hey, wife." It was just such a funny little self-indulgent moment, but I loved it.
You are so great. You are. You're a great gal.
Really? I'm a great gal?
Yup, you are. You're a great gal.
A gal. A great gal. Imagine that. I'm a gal. You have to get out of my car now.
Okay.
Marguerite, what are you doing with young Squire?
My civic duty.
Your civic duty. Huh?
Guy!
Is he yours?
One of 4. Thank you for his safe return.
Well, keep a better eye on him. One more martini, I'd have me a cabana boy.
I kind of felt like he came across as like a gay fairy godfather, which I really found entertaining.
What a description.
It was because he seemed like he dropped into their lives and just kind of like helped them all out a little bit. He was more like a fairy godfather character than he was like a manager to me. Like you'd think that a manager of this in this kind of big LA music scene kind of thing would be very money focused and wouldn't really care about, if it was a darker movie, he would abuse them and he wouldn't really care about their own personal happiness. He'd just be looking at the bottom line. But when the band breaks up, he's kind of like, "Well, the band's broken up, but you know, you guys should, you know, you should probably go and be with Faye because she seems like a really special gal."
You know, Guy, Horace was right about you. You are the smart one. Lenny is the fool. Jimmy is the talent. Faye is... Well, no, Faye is special, isn't she? And you are the smart one. That's what I think, anyway.
Speaking of like fairy godfathers, though, the other character we haven't talked about is the hotel concierge.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Oh yeah.
Like, how can you mention Fairy Godfather without talking about him? Like, oh my god.
How do you guys feel about that final shot where he looks at the camera?
I really liked it in a way that made it feel like this is just stupid.
Yeah, I felt like in any other film, almost any other film, it would just be like, oh no. But because this film is so charming and just gets by on pure kind of charisma, because it is featherweight, like there's no conflict particularly. The plot is paper thin. It's not saying anything particularly deep, but it is just so utterly charming that when he breaks the fourth wall and just smiles at the camera, you kind of just chuckle and go, of course he did. Like, yeah. It doesn't like break the reality because this film isn't grounded in any kind of reality. So.
Yeah, it's probably the closest you can get to the actual Tom Hanks looking at the camera and smiling. It's like, he can't do that, but it might as well. That's him by extension.
Yeah. Because he just, like, was he ever off duty? He seemed like
No,
he was, like,
no,
24/7 he was at that door. Like.
Yeah, he was 24/7 on that. Did he own the hotel as well?
No, he was the concierge, I think, unless he was an extremely invested hotel manager. I don't know. But...
No, I'm not sure. But yeah, he was absolutely always on and never sort of taking it easy.
No, he was always
while doing his job. He was always just going above and beyond, shouting at other people, just like, "Hey, why are you carrying those bags? That's my job."
Yeah, well, that was the very end. It did play a little bit uncomfortably where Tom Everett Scott and Liv Tyler, they have their big kiss moment and they walk back into the hotel room. And first of all, I was thinking, well, you still need to check out, guys. Like, yeah. but then also they kind of go. Tom Everett Scott just kind of goes off and, oh, hey, Lamar, get my bags, will you? And he kind of goes, "That's what I do." I was like, ooh, okay.
Well, actually, the worst part for me is that while they're making out, they make out for a while. He's watching them and he smiles. He's going like, "Damn!" It's really weird, but it's still, it works just because the movie.
Well, the thing that I found weird
has you by then
is that he didn't say, "Get my bags for me." He said, "Look after her bags for me."
Oh,
or something
right.
like that. Just like, so you're going in there like. Just for a few minutes?
Just for a quick one, yeah, before noon? Is it
like, are you going to be back soon? What's going on here? It was still a bit weird.
Lamar, would you mind watching our things?
Oh, that's what I do.
All right, I am ready for drinking games.
We always like to hear that. So do you want to go first then?
I think my first one is one that we all probably have, but I'll just go ahead and say it. Drink every time they play That Thing You Do.
Oh, God damn it.
Yes, of course. Of course. That is the ultimate drinking game for this film.
Yep.
Harry, have you got one?
Yeah, well, mine's kind of the opposite of that. Drink whenever they play anything other than That Thing You Do.
Okay,
it does happen.
There are other songs in this film, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of I believe the soundtrack is all original music, because it's all written to sound like 60s songs. Okay, so my first one is drink every time the characters are unnecessarily horrible to Giovanni Ribisi.
I had a similar one. I wrote, drink every time the movie shits on Giovanni Ribisi.
Why are they so mean to him? Like, Steve Zahn in particular is a prick to him. He's like, who are you again? And then when he breaks his arm, because he's doing a jumping game and he falls and he breaks his arm, and he's lying in the road writhing in pain, and Steve Zahn just laughs and goes, "That asshole broke his arm." And like, if one of your close friends reacted that way if you broke your arm, you'd be pretty upset. I feel like he is a very forgiving character.
Yeah, well, even when it's not characters actively doing it to him, the movie itself seems to have this perverse pleasure in torturing him, because the first time they play at the competition, he shows up to the show and he's just standing among the crowd going like, "Oh, that's too fast, that's too fast." And then the crowd starts getting into the song and then somebody bumps into him and he just, goes down in pain again. Or then later when you see him going up to the store and basically taking the help needed sign, and you just feel like, okay, well, this guy just gave up. Now he's just taking a regular job.
Yeah, lovable loser's kind of the role Giovanni Ribisi was born to play, really. It seems to be kind of his type.
I guess.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
How you doing?
Oh, Chad. Hey. Hey, Chad.
Have you got any more?
Drink every time a guy calls himself Spartacus.
Oh, that's good.
Good one.
That was a nice slogan.
What was that about?
It's from the film Spartacus. But then at the beginning you have that scene.
That doesn't help me.
It's a very famous film with Charlton Heston in the 60s. It's got the famous scene basically where the character just goes, "I'm Spartacus," and then all of the other characters go, "I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus." Yeah, this is how he's showing his age here. But
sorry, I don't know a film from the 60s.
Sorry, well, I wasn't alive either, but some of us know our references.
Say it. Say it again.
I am Spartacus.
Oh, yes.
Drink for every time a character kisses somebody.
Oh, okay.
Now, there are a lot. There's the ones we talked about, all at the end of the film.
Yeah.
And there's plenty throughout. The one that really stood out for me was when they just finished that gig at a sports ground or something.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was the gig where they all run off stage. They have to unplug quickly and run off stage.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah. And then they've got to run up this ramp when there's fans just crowding them, very sort of Beatles type thing. And just the bass player just hangs back a little bit, just have a little snog with one of the fans.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Just before Liv Tyler nearly doesn't get in the car with them.
Oh, right, yeah. He does get around that bass player.
Yeah.
Would the kiss that Steve Zahn gives the cardboard cutout, would that qualify?
That would absolutely qualify.
That leads on quite nicely to my next one, which was drink every time Steve Zahn gets shot down. He just can't catch a break, that guy.
Well, he catches a huge break.
He does, yeah. He does catch a break with the working girl. But there's that scene where he's hitting on that girl who wants to know whether Jimmy has a girlfriend. He's like, oh yeah, he's got a very serious girlfriend. And she's like, how about the bass player? He's like, well, I'm single. And she's like, how about the bass player? Poor Steve Zahn. I wouldn't kick him out of bed. I don't think he's that unattractive. But
he's fine.
I guess that was just a joke. But...
Oh, great. Tina made it. I'll handle this, don't worry. Hi, I'm Lenny.
Hi,
What's your name?
Chrissy.
Yeah, he's got a very pretty girlfriend, doesn't he?
Is it serious, do you know?
Very serious. I'm single.
What about the bass player?
He's married.
Any more?
Yeah, I have drink every time someone geeks out about Del Paxton.
Nice.
Yeah, true. Harry? Are you done?
No, I'm done.
The only one I had drink for Beatles references.
Oh, that's a good one. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Liverpool, so I was probably more primed to pick up on these than most people because I had the Beatles kind of drilled into me as a child. But there's lots of kind of subtle ones, like the manager being gay, and there's actual references to the Beatles in the film. They mention them a lot in the film, and there's obviously the bit when they're on the TV show where there's the monkeys. Not the band, the monkeys, but the chimpanzees with Beatles mop tops on being like dubbed as if they were the Beatles. So,
do you know that was voiced by Tom Hanks?
Really?
Yeah.
he is a man of many talents.
I really love, this is on the extended version only, there's that moment where the chimpanzees are walking off stage and Guy just found out that the bass player has disappeared. And he goes by, he's like, can that chimp really play the bass?
It's like, ooh, that is desperate.
There's a lot of really good throwaway jokes in this.
Look at us, we're on the telly. Is that where we are? Of course, you twit. Look, there's the Queen of England. I thought we were in America. No, mate. She's followed us here. That's how big a fan she is. I was hoping to meet Gina Lola Brigida. Stand in line, chum. I'm hoping Troy Chesterfield gives me the leftovers.
My last one would be drink every time you see a famous cameo or would-be famous cameo.
Oh, so that's good.
Yeah, I have Bryan Cranston, Kevin Pollak, Charlize Theron, who wasn't famous at the time, Rita Wilson, Giovanni Ribisi, because I think that he wasn't that big back then.
No.
Colin Hanks, and then Clint Howard, the DJ.
So that's one I had was just drink every time Tom Everett Scott pulls a weird face. Mm-hmm. He's very expressive in his facial expression.
Yeah, he did some really good faces, actually.
He did, yeah.
Very entertaining.
Put him and Emilia Clarke. Yeah, put him, Tom Everett Scott and Amelia Clarke in a movie together, and it's just going to be a face-off. Yeah. Call it Face-Off. Remake Face-Off. Cool. Okay, so before we get to some sequels, I guess we should talk about Patreon.
That's what we do.
This is our moment to plug ourselves. So we are now available on Patreon for people who are big fans of the show, of which Julio is one. So thank you very much, Julio, for being a supporter on Patreon. It really means a lot to us.
It's my pleasure.
Cool. So yeah, if you do go to patreon.com/Beyond the Box Set, you'll find our page where we offer a range of incentives for people who want to hear a little bit more about the show and learn a little bit more about us. We have a pay-as-you-feel tiered system, which means you can pay as much or as little as you like, and you get access to all the same content. So what do we do, Harry? What incentives do we offer?
Well, we have a bonus show called Beyond the Box Set, where we review cinema-released movies. Mm-hmm. Current movies, I should say.
Current cinema releases, yeah.
That's better. We also, as we're doing this week, every month we will take one podcast and we will invite them to guest on our show.
Yeah. Well, one Patreon. They don't have to be a podcast.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It so happens so far. All our patrons have also been podcasters, which is great. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you would like to come and be on a guest on the show, you can choose a film. And yeah, once a month, one of our patrons from Patreon, that always confuses me, will join us. And yeah, we've had a few on now. It's always been great. So we'll do that.
As another feature, any of our patrons can give us their name and any details they'd like, made up or otherwise, and we will write you into one of our sequels as a character in said film.
Immortality.
Yes. And as a final thing that we offer, we once a month will also give a 30-second advert slot to anything that you want to promote. Mm-hmm. This could be your own podcast, it could be a business that you run, it could be anything. I'm just looking around John's apartment to see what's advertisable. An iron, a lamp.
Yeah.
You can advertise your couch. You can advertise the world's largest stereo. What is that, John? That's been in the corner for years.
I know.
It's like the size of a car.
I do have a very large old school stereo system that I never play anymore, but I don't have the heart to throw it away.
Well, it's made by Sony, so Sony, you need to become patrons now.
True, yeah, I guess we've now inadvertently plugged them.
Hey, Drew, what do you do every other Wednesday?
Specifically, every other Wednesday, I watch a movie, Nathan.
Oh my gosh, I talk about movies every other Wednesday.
Oh my gosh, if we take my movie watching and you're talking about movies...
We can make a podcast!
We can make a podcast, that'd be great!
But what would we call it?
I don't know, I mean, I get the feels for the movies.
And I get the reels part of it.
Man, if we combine the two, we could have the Real Feels Podcast.
I love it!
Okay, you know what? We're going to find us on iTunes and Podbean. It's going to be great.
Every other Wednesday.
We're going to be the realest.
The feelest.
Right, should we get some sequels?
Yes, let's do it. So, Julio, would you like to go first, or...?
So you guys did one together, right?
Yes, we've done a joint one, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So mine, I kind of underestimated how long it was going to take me and overestimated my writing speed. And so I think that the way it looks now as I'm looking at it, it's like it has like a lot of detail at the beginning, and then the closer I get to the end, which was the closer I got to the time we had to record, I was like, fuck it, this happens and then this happens and then this happens. So
Julio, you have no idea
that
how
never
many of our
happens to
ideas.
us. Never happens. Never happens. Can't relate to that at all.
First 5 minutes of the movie take up like 3 sides of A4, and then it's like, then he'll die at the end, or whatever.
Then it's the Truman Show.
Yeah.
Okay, so mine is called That Thing You Did.
Oh, good.
It takes place in 2014, which is exactly 50 years since the events of the movie. So in the movie, the Wonders released That Thing You Do in 1964, and they're famous for 4 months or so, and then they disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, by 2014, of course, it's a different kind of culture, and you have the internet and social media. And I guess the tagline, if I had to give a tagline, would be, can anything stay truly forgotten? Is the whole point of this story, is that they're going to come back in a way, which is, I think, what you'd expect. And I was wondering if you guys were going to go this way, because the first impulse is to do a returning tour of the Wonders. And I didn't quite go that way, but we'll see. So we open with a really poor recording of the Wonders performance at the Hollywood Television Showcase. It looks like VHS bad, where the music is, you can barely hear it, the images are all distorted, and there's somebody watching that tape, and they're kind of annoyed, and it's like, is this the best we have? And there's some technicians around them, and they're like, yeah. So he's like, okay, well, fine, this will do, but we can always replace the audio with something better. And then we pull back, and we see that it's Colin Hanks.
Oh, okay.
Who in this movie, he's playing Mr. White's son, so he's his father's son.
The role he was born to play.
Yep, yeah. And he is the current president of Playtone Records. So somebody asked him if he wants to put the clip on the webpage, and he's like, not yet, I need to talk to them first. And somebody in the office is like, okay, well, we should still have James Mattingly's contact info. That's Jimmy. And Colin Hanks, his name is Logan White. He's like, no, I think I need to talk to somebody else first. And then on the monitor, we see the distorted image of Guy, playing drums and that very famous show they did. So now we cut to 2014 Guy. And my idea is that we're just going to use the same actors. They're just going to have old age makeup. And
sure.
And hopefully we have like a good old age makeup person. So it looks decent. That doesn't look like, I don't know if you guys ever watch J. Edgar, the Clint Eastwood movie about the FBI director, but that has Leonardo DiCaprio and Armie Hammer, and they look terrible when they're supposed to be old people. So not like that. We're gonna go with just less caked on makeup and more just maybe accentuating the lines and maybe messing with the hair. But yeah, same actors all coming back who, 50 years later. So that means that if we're assuming that they're in their early 20s in the movie, then they're in their early 70s now. So you see Tom Everett Scott in his 70s. He looks healthy. Instead of wearing shades, now he's just wearing bifocals. He's doing the dishes, and he can listen from the living room. He can hear his grandkids playing some weird like screamo song on the latest rock band, and he's just kind of trying to keep it together, but he finally can't take it anymore. He goes out there and pretty gently he's like, can you guys turn it down a little? And the kids were teenagers, 14, 13, 15. They're like, well, it's not as fun if it's not loud. This is rock and roll, Grandpa. And he's like, no, it isn't. And he walks away. He's turned into an old man. So he goes out the front yard where Faye is doing some gardening. They're still together. He asks her if she wants to trade. She'll finish the dishes and he'll finish the yard. And she asks if the kids are still playing the game. He's like, yeah. And she's like, okay, then I'm staying out here. And they're just kind of talking, and he's complaining about that kind of music that they listen to. And Faye's like, well, you could show them good stuff. And he's like, I've tried. They're not interested. And she's like, you should try harder. And he just kind of grumbles because, he knows what she means, but he doesn't want to go there. So they're interrupted by the arrival of Colin Hanks. Introduces himself as Logan White. He's Andy White's son. And Faye makes a connection. It's like, Mr. White? Playtone, Mr. White? And Logan's like, yep. And it's like, do you guys have a minute? So he sets up this sort of presentation in Guy's home office. He has a laptop, and he's getting it ready, and he starts telling him kind of like the story of what happened to Playtone Records since their Wonders disappeared. He tells him about how like they were doing really well for a while, but then they almost went under during the 80s because they failed to adapt to the times. His dad was actually, he rose up to be president of the company, which is something that you see, I think, on the liner notes of the soundtrack. But then his dad, Andy White, died in a car accident, and the company's new president took it a new direction during the 90s, and it just kind of focused on smaller acts, more like turning it into an indie label instead of the usual big bands touring that they had before. And they kind of like, they barely get by, so, with that kind of approach. But then in the 2000s, Logan acquired the company and took over his father's old position, and now he's been working for 14 years to just bring Playtone Records to what it used to be, because they used to be huge ones. They had a galaxy of stars, and guys like, yeah, I remember. And Logan's like, I think that it's a mistake to ignore our past. We even look like we're ashamed of it. Instead, we should just embrace it, and so they want to celebrate their history. And then he plays them a video on his computer, and it's just a collection of snippets of old concert footage and interviews, all with the past stars from their catalog. And Guy and Faye just kind of feel what's coming, and of course eventually we see footage of Jimmy and Lenny and the bass player and Guy all goofing off, giving interviews, and then playing That Thing You Do. And we see the video from the very beginning where it's all messed up, but you can recognize it's them. And Logan says, yeah, I'm working on getting a better copy. But it's like, do you guys know that it's been 50 years since the release of That Thing You Do? And Guy's just kind of trying to act unimpressed. And he's like, well, what exactly are you trying to sell here? Do you need me to autograph some old records? Do you need me to do an interview? And Colin Hanks is like, well, I want to get the band back together. I want the Wonders to play at our big Playtone retro extravaganza at the end of the month. We're doing this thing where, we're just bringing bands to cover the old hits, bringing the bands that are still together, they're really old, they're coming in to just play this one big show. And Guy just laughs. He's like, that's insane. And Colin Hanks is like, no, I want you guys to be the main act. And Guy is like, well, why would you want us to be? We're a one-hit wonder band. How desperate are you? And Logan is like, well, for one, you're the only band who still has all the original members alive. And,
ooh, harsh but true.
And the guy is like, well, that's flattering. And Logan is like, well, it gives you a responsibility. You're the survivors. You have to represent your era. You need to reward your old fans, create new fans. And Guy's not buying it, but Logan just keeps going. It's like, you don't sell yourself short. You are still the fastest rising single in the history of Playtone, and that's for a reason. Your music was great. But Guy, refuses. He's like, this is all very flattering, but I just don't play anymore. And even if I did, and you could wrangle everyone else together, I don't think we'd play well anymore. I was like, do your research. Find out why the Wonders never recorded a new album. And Colin Hanks is like, I know what happened. I know about Mattingly. But Guy's like, well, that's all you need to know. And then he just kind of like ushers him out and just kicks him out of the house. But Faye stays behind with Logan and, just apologizes to him because Guy had been a little rude. And Logan tells her that he's pretty sure he can get Jimmy to play, but Faye tells him that she doesn't think that would matter. And then Logan gives her a flash drive, and she's like, well, anyway, you should have this because this is, the history of your band. So later that night, they're in bed, and Faye's on her laptop, and she's going through the files on the flash drive, and it's pictures, some videos of, just their brief history with Playtone and the band. And she seems to be really into it, but Guy isn't. He's just kind of annoyed. He's like, just stop it. And she tells him that she hopes that he didn't turn the whole thing down because of her. And she's like, I'm a big girl. I'm like in my 70s. I can handle my old ex-boyfriend being around. I can certainly handle him better now than I did 50 years ago. And Guy says, well, maybe I can't handle him. Maybe I just don't want to put up with his attitude. And Faye just kind of looks at him and she's like, is that really it? And Guy just grumbles, turns around, turns his lamp off, asks her to at least lower the volume. And Faye does that, but, she keeps watching the videos. And then you see an interview where Lenny is goofing off, Steve Zahn. He's making faces behind Jimmy, being just Lenny. And so we close up on Lenny's face in the video, and then we cut to present-day Lenny. So Steve Zahn in old-age makeup. And he's driving a convertible with the top down, like he said he would last time we saw him. Speeding down the highway, talking on the phone. And he's basically asking his assistant to book him a flight to Washington, D.C., which is where Faye and Guy live. And it's like, ASAP, also book me a hotel, send a bouquet of flowers to Faye Patterson. And then we cut to Guy, who's at the mall watching over his grandkids as they're like playing at the arcade game. And he just hears somebody scream. It's like, Sketch Patterson. And he turns, and, there's Steve Zahn, there's Lenny. And, he's lost some hair. He looks, obviously, he's in his 70s, but you can still tell, like, he has that energy that he used to have. So he just kind of starts giving Guy a hard time for turning down the offer from White Jr. And he's like, I can't believe that I had to hear this from Faye. You wouldn't even tell me. And Guy doesn't want to talk about it. And Lenny's just relentless again, like White before him. So Guy just kind of shoos away his grandkids. He's like, I don't want you hearing this. And Lenny's like, we need to do this. And when Guy won't budge, then Lenny tells him, listen, I could use the money. And Guy's like, well, I thought you were doing fine with your casinos. Because, if you remember in the end credits, it says that, yeah, he may be single, but he became like a successful casino owner in Vegas. And Steve Zahn is like, no, not really. It's kind of all like a big front. I made the mistake of getting involved with some shady people. And Guy's like, again? And he's like, well, I just, trust me, I could really use the money. And Guy's like, okay, how much money? I can just help you. And Lenny's like, I'm not going to take your money, but I'll take the money from Playtone. So let's just do this. And then Lenny, because he knows Guy probably, as well or almost as well as Faye, because they went way back, he's like, tell me the truth. Why aren't you doing this? And it's like, I know it's not Jimmy. And so the guy tells him, he's like, I've just worked too hard and too long to just bury that time in my life. I mean, it was great. It was among the best times ever, but then it just hurt so much when it ended that I've never played again since. And I've always wondered if I should have. And now I'm in my 70s and it's not the right time to go back and kind of like try to choose the other path. So it's like, I'm done. And Lenny tells him, listen, 70 is the new 50. Let's just pretend you're having like a 3/4 life crisis and just... Don't you want your grandkids to see you play? And it's like, no. And Lenny's like, well, they should. And Guy kind of glances at the teenagers playing, the arcade games. And he kind of has a moment where, like, maybe I should. And then Lenny tells him, listen, I already called Logan White. He's sending a plane to pick us up. He's going to take us to L.A. He's going to give us another hard pitch. So he goes. And now we're at the Playtone offices. And Logan is just thrilled that Guy changed his mind. And Guy's like, well, I might change it back, depending on how Jimmy comes about this. And Logan nods, and then he's like, well, I might have overestimated my persuasive abilities when it came to Jimmy. He's like, oh, he doesn't want to do it. He's like, well, he'll do it, but he just wants to do it with a different band. He wants to just bring a couple of his old bandmates from the Hertzman because they're still in the biz. And Guy's like, okay, well, that's fine. He can do that, and I'll just go home. But Logan doesn't want that. He wants it to be special. I mean, he doesn't want a cover band doing Wonder songs. And Guy tells him, well, there's not much we can do. I mean, if he doesn't want to do it, it's not as if Jimmy's going to react positively if I show up to ask him. And Logan's like, well, he might, if you show up and you're kind of apologetic about the whole thing. And Guy blows up. He's like, apologize for what? I didn't do anything wrong. But Lenny, it's like, we'll go. It's like, I'll do the talking. You just need to show up there. It's like, don't you want to see what Jimmy looks like 50 years later? And Guy's like, no. And Steve Zahn's like, no, it'll be fun. So and we cut to like a bottle smashing against the wall. And then we see Jimmy, like all Jimmy. He's half drunk. He's like yelling at Guy and Lenny. He's telling them that Playtone can go to hell. And Guy's like, yeah, you're right. This is fun. And Lenny's trying to calm Jimmy down. He's like, listen, it's a new company now. It's Mr. White's son. It's a new leader that cares for the artists. And Jimmy doesn't care. He's like, I made the mistake twice. I trusted Playtone, and they only care for themselves. They screwed me over. They made a lot of money. I made them a lot of money. And then they wouldn't stand behind me. And they wouldn't even give me my masters when I left. They hide behind their contracts and all that. So then Guy's like, okay, then why did you even say that you were going to do it with other band members? And he's like, I just wanted to piss him off. I was going to make them jump through loops. I was never going to do it anyway. I didn't think that they were going to be so dumb to try to use you to convince me. And now, like, he looks so angry and he's just so bitter that Lenny doesn't even know what to say. So Guy's like, all right, well, we're just going to go. I was like, sorry, we wasted your time and ours. And as they're walking away, Jimmy asks Guy to stay. And Lenny kind of gives Guy a look. It's like, okay, well, this might be our chance. Don't blow it. So once they're by themselves, Jimmy asks Guy about Faye. He's like, how's Faye doing? And Guy gets all tense. He's like, she's okay. And Jimmy, he's really drunk, and he starts kind of stammering through this sort of apology, like really clumsily. And he just asks Guy to pass it on, to say that he's sorry for the way he handled everything way back then. And Guy's like, you could just apologize in person or call her or whatever. But Jimmy's like, no, that would be uncomfortable for everybody involved. Can you just let her know? And then he asks him if he wants a drink. And Guy's like, well, Lenny's waiting. And Jimmy's like, screw Lenny. And he just pours Guy a drink. And then they start drinking. And as they're drinking, Jimmy starts rambling on about his career, the ups and downs, all the regrets. And he comes back to the Wonders, and he's like, I made it gold 3 times with the Hertzman, but I feel like I never escaped the shadow of the Wonders. And then guy goes like, well, I think you mean the Oneaters. And then and then they kind of smile, they laugh, and then we cut to the office of the new Mr. White, and then we find out that okay, so Guy has cut this deal with Jimmy because he felt bad for him after this whole thing, and he's like, okay, he tells White that they're gonna do the show, but only if Jimmy gets his music back, all the masters that he recorded back, when he was with the Hertzman with the label. And Logan White, he's like, sure, I don't care. Yeah, I think that's only fair. I just want you guys for the show. It's great. Now we have another problem though. And he's like, what is it? It's like, well, while you guys were talking, I went and I recruited the last member of our band. And so they walk into the recording area and they find the old bass player. And he looks pretty bad. Like, he's in pretty bad shape. And I don't know if you guys remember, but, he actually went to war. He got wounded twice and he got like a medal or something. So he doesn't look like he can actually perform. He's missing a leg. He has like a metal leg, like Lieutenant Dan had him.
I was thinking as he Lieutenant Dan, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Like really bit in a wheelchair, really bitter. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. He's still kind of, he looks like a nice guy, but he's like, guys, I really can't. Like, if you look at me, my arms are all messed up. I don't have the energy to do it, to do like a whole show. And Jimmy is just like, well, you know what? He didn't even play with us when we were on TV. So like, who cares? We just call the Wolfman, the guy that, subbed in for him. And Logan White's like, yeah, the Wolfman dead. He overdosed 20 years ago. That's not an option. But even he's like, I agree that we need a replacement, but we still need the original bass player on the show. He needs to pass the torch, so we can just have him on stage, and then he just hands over the bass to the new bassist, and at least that way, there's this sense of closure. It's like we have all this information from way back then, and the one thing people didn't like about that performance at the Hollywood TV show was that you were missing one of your members, that you got a replacement. Now we have the internet, we have the potential to just gather all the data and make choices according to it. So let's do it right. And then Guy has an idea. He's like, okay, well, I think I have a replacement. And so he calls his sister and he asks her, I was like, is your husband there? And then we cut to, just the big festival. And then we find the replacement that he's called is Chad, Giovanni Ribisi, who, he literally became part of the family. He married Guy's sister. And it turns out that this entire time he's been learning how to play bass. He was like, I knew it would come in handy someday. I was like, I knew I could never be the drummer that you were, but I could definitely be a better bass player than, Ethan Embry. So I'll be honored to be a part of the Wonders again. So they're ready. And now we go into that montage where we see them rehearse and we see them, just slowly get back into the tunes that they used to play. So now we're at the night of the show and they're almost ready. There are people playing, and then Guy has a panic attack when he sees that Faye has brought the entire family. I mean, if you remember, the end credits say that they had 4 kids. And those kids are now, in their 40s. And those kids, have kids, so that's how they have grandkids. And then plus all the other fans. And it finally hit him, again, what he's managed to push down through this entire process. It's just that it's really scary. He's in his 70s and he's meeting his fans again. He hasn't played live music again ever since the Wonders broke up. And so he tries to run away. But then Faye, who knows her husband, she catches him. And she just talks him down the edge. And she's like, you're going to regret it if you don't do this. And Guy calms down. He comes back into backstage. And when he comes back, he finds out that stupid Chad has broken his arm again.
Poor Chad. Can't catch a break.
Yeah, he was just messing around and he fell and he broke his arm. And now they're like, well, what
same
are we
arm
do?
or different arm?
Same arm. Let's say it's the same arm. It's done. That arm's gonna be gone. And so the bass player, he's like, you know what? I'll do it. And they're like, but you can't play. It's like, I can manage. Let's not do an encore. Let's just play the big hits and then get out of here. And so he does, and they play perfectly, and it's just transmitted everywhere. With the internet, it's just live streamed everywhere, and it's a huge success. And by the end of it, they kind of look at each other like, well, maybe we could do this more than once in the future. And that's kind of it.
Oh, that's really nice. I was thinking throughout that, like, oh, it's so nice that Chad gets a redemption at the end, but then nope, it still all falls apart for him.
I could not resist the cheap joke of having him break his arm.
Well, I guess when you're in his 70s, it's easily done. Just a little fall and then suddenly... Poor Chad. No, I thought that was really good. Yeah, I like that idea of having them back as like a... I didn't think of that. Like, we had a lot of... I put this out onto... We'll get to our listener submissions at the end, and a lot of people did suggest that kind of, 20 years in the future, but they were more like, in the 80s kind of idea, whereas the idea that actually the band, if it was to the present day, they'd all be in their 70s. That's a really interesting idea. So
yeah, I kind of like,
really cool.
because that was my first thought too, the 80s. And then I was like, I don't really, it just seems like it would be so much harder to set everything up in the 80s. But if I set it in current day, then we can play a little bit more with like current technology. And I actually like the idea that they're all in their 70s. You don't see that much, that kind of movie where really old people are doing the things that we see them do when they're young. So.
Yeah, it reminded me, there is a film from about 1998 called Still Crazy. It's got Billy Connolly and Timothy Spall and Bill Nighy from Love Actually in it. They play like an old rock band that gets back together, but they are all like, in their 60s. And so it reminded me a lot of that. So yeah, I think that could be a very workable, very kind of realistic sequel to that thing you do. So yeah, excellent.
I am Spartacus!
Of course, we get to our one then, Harry.
Sure thing. So, Julio, have you seen the film Love Actually?
Yes.
So
that is the first episode of your podcast I listened to.
Oh, really?
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. It was really weird because it's kind of a very different episode from most of your other ones. So the dynamic that you guys have in that episode really threw me off.
Because we hate each other.
Right. It's just John demolishing the movie, and Harry's just trying to defend it a little bit. But I was like, wow.
Harry's just trying not to cry.
Yeah, so I thought that maybe that's what the dynamic was, that you guys would take turns destroying each other's movies.
No. I have thought that might be a good idea for a podcast, but I just don't know how I could do it.
You're not quite as mean-spirited as I am, so I don't know if you could, like, bi-weekly find it in yourself to destroy me. I'm not sure.
But also, I don't know if I could take it bi-weekly either.
True, yeah. It might just ruin our friendship. Like, once a year we can do that kind of episode, but other than that, it might destroy our friendship.
It was a tough week. Okay, but so I guess you've seen Love Actually then. So, do you remember Bill Nighy was playing a rock star?
Right.
And he had a manager called Joe?
Yes.
Well, he is going to be the main character of our film.
Mm-hmm. Like that actual character.
Yes, that actual character. And so we're calling it That Thing You Manage.
Yeah, and this is kind of the basis of this is the idea that kind of what I mentioned earlier, how Tom Hanks in the original film he's kind of like a fairy godfather, where he kind of pops into their lives and kind of takes them up to the stars and then kind of disappears quite gracefully when the moment's passed. So we kind of thought, well, that might be an interesting kind of dynamic to see how a manager might do that in other kind of contexts. And obviously the Bill Nighy, Bill Nighy's manager Joe is a very benevolent manager in Love Actually too. He's kind of almost like a long-suffering friend.
Yeah, he puts up with a lot in that movie.
Yeah. And another thing we reference in this, have you ever seen the TV show Quantum Leap?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, so you know how in that thing, Scott Bakula's character, he kind of jumps around different time frames, jumping into different bodies and into different circumstances, different time periods, etc.
Right.
Helping people out, and then when he's done, he kind of moves on to the next thing. So that's kind of some of the influences we had with this sequel, which I'll hand over to Harry now to introduce.
Okay, so it's the world of Love Actually. 10, 15 years later, whatever it is, I don't know, we'll care. Joe is the manager of Bill Nighy's character, who was called Bill, I believe.
Oh, wow, that's
convenient.
A real stretch for Bill Nighy.
And so one day, the two of them have a fight in Bill's London house, which results in Bill firing Joe. Joe walks off into the city to get drunk by himself and gets absolutely plastered and eventually goes back to his own place where he passes out in a bed. The next day, he is extremely hungover, but does remember the fight and getting fired. So he walks out of his apartment to make his way over to Joe's to try and sort of get his job back. On the way there, he is completely oblivious of everything that's going on around him.
Because he's very hungover.
Because he's very hungover, yes. There is currently a massive battle going on in the sky between a load of flying robots, some aliens, and a stupidly dressed man with a young female sidekick.
All right.
This is going to come back around to that thing you do. It's working its way around.
I'm going to try to not figure it out. I'm just going to let you take me on the ride.
Yeah, just enjoy the journey. Enjoy the journey. Yeah.
On Joe's travels, he eventually needs the toilet, as some of us do.
After a nice out.
Yeah. And he walks into what he thinks is a small blue public toilet on a street corner, of which inside he cannot find a urinal, and so decides to take a break and lean against this bit in the middle. He passes out, falling to the floor, while accidentally pressing loads of buttons. The console lights up, extremely bright, and a large burst of energy transfers from it to him. We cut to black.
Mm-hmm. Joe wakes up in a strange hotel room, feeling, once again, very hungover. He wanders into the bathroom to splash some water on his face, as people always do in films, but never in real life. And he's shocked to discover when he looks into the mirror that he now is in a different body. And that body for this part of the film is going to be played by the actor Samuel L. Jackson.
Okay.
So we're going to get a lot of stars in this, so they're all going to play these small roles. So it's not the actor Samuel L. Jackson, it's just Samuel L. Jackson playing a character. So he staggers out of the hotel, he's very confused, he doesn't know where he is, and a large camper van pulls up. And out of the camper van jumps the character Horace, who was in the original That Thing You Do movie. He was the original manager of the band before he kind of handed over to Tom Hanks, the older guy, who gets them on the radio. So he jumps out of this camper van that he has, and he says, "Get in." So Joe jumps in, and he asks what's going on. And Horace explains that due to a complicated sci-fi mix-up that we're not going to get into particularly, he's been sent into a time travel loop, which is tied to his destiny, which has always been, as a band manager, to help up-and-coming pop singers to reach the top of the charts. So the only way for him to get home is to help at least one of these singers to become a genuine superstar. So it's like Quantum Leap, basically. He's trapped in a time travel kind of loop where he's constantly going to be jumping to different periods in pop history. And his mission is just to help these singers to have a hit. And then once he's done that, he can move on to the next one. Eventually, he'll leap home. So it's really a complete Quantum Leap ripoff. So
But
Joe's still very
like,
confused.
music focused, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. If Quantum Leap was set in the record industry, basically. So Joe's still very confused, but he asks, well, where are we going first? And Horace explains. Horace is going to be, if you remember Quantum Leap, Scott Bakula's character had kind of a holographic assistant who would always explain what the mission was at the beginning of the episode and kind of guide him through it.
He's going to be the Dean Stockwell of your movie.
Yes, it was Dean Stockwell. So we felt like Horace from the original movie, the older manager, can play the Dean Stockwell role, basically. Horace explains that he's going to introduce Joe to a hot up-and-coming German jazz singer who goes by the name of Lou Bega.
Oh my God.
So they arrive at the studio where Bega is working on his latest track, which is a slow and depressing jazz number about his past struggles with drug addiction, with lyrics including a little bit of methadone in my life, a little bit of cocaine, I'm up till 5, a little bit of heroin in the sun, a little bit of ketamine, and I'm done. Joe steps into the recording booth and says, "Lou, baby, the song has potential, but no one's going to buy this depressing unless you lose some weight and put on a beehive. How about doing it up with an up-tempo swing and substituting the drugs for girls' names?"
So Lou's a little bit skeptical, but he agrees to go along with it. And the retitled song Mambo No. 5 soon becomes a global smash hit. And Joe manages him through several glorious months of touring the world, much like he does with The Wonders, until the novelty obviously begins to wear off and the record company demands a follow-up single. So Lou turns to Joe and says, "Well, I've got nothing, how about you?" And Joe shrugs. And suddenly he's pulled back into the time vortex.
Oh God, I actually remember the follow-up. I don't know if you guys ever saw it. Like I remember it being on MTV for like maybe a week, and then the world decided that they did not care for anything else from Lou Bega.
We looked it up while we were writing this, and oh my God, it's the exact same song. Apart from, instead of girls' names, it's just places.
I've got a girl in Paris, a girl in Rome. Yes, I even got a girl in the Vatican Dome. How could it fail? How could it fail?
Awful.
Yeah. Anyway, Harry, continue.
So he now comes to in the early 90s in LA in an opulently decorated bedroom. He rushes to the mirror, expecting not to look like himself. This time the reflection shows an athletic, middle-aged businesswoman who's going to be played by Sharon Stone. She gets a call on her massive early 90s cell phone, and Horace tells her to meet him outside. But once again, he speeds her off to a meeting in his camper van.
And this time the meeting is with a struggling early 90s pop rock duo who go by the name of the Rembrandts.
I don't know the Rembrandts.
Okay,
you'll know them.
You'll pick it up. Okay. So they've written an exceedingly catchy tune called "I'll Be There for You," but for some reason they just can't get it played on the radio because this is the early 90s and it's the height of the grunge era, and these kind of sunny pop songs are really out of fashion. So Sharon snaps her fingers and says, "If we can't get this record on the radio, let's put it on TV." She puts in a call to NBC and asks if they have any up-and-coming TV pilots that are in need of a theme tune.
Cut to some months later, and "I'll Be There For You" is the theme tune to the most popular TV sitcom of the decade, and, arguably all time, let's be honest. Friends!
Don't give it away. There'll be some mystery.
So are they the Rembrandts in real life? Is that the name of the band?
That's the name of the band who recorded the song "I'll Be There For You," which is the theme from Friends, yes.
Yeah.
That's so meta ironic that I wouldn't know the name of the band, but I would know the song.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
You're proving the point, yeah.
The band are a huge success, but unfortunately, the overexposure of the song overshadows them, and nobody's interested in hearing any of their other records. After their next single fails to chart, they acrimoniously break up, and Sharon Stone finds herself back in the time vortex.
So Joe, the manager, wakes up this time in the 1980s at a comedy gig headlined by a fast-talking African-American comedian. During the act, the comedian does some musical skits, and Joe notices that he actually has a pretty decent singing voice. So after the show, he's taken backstage and introduced to the comic, who announces that he has aspirations to launch a musical career. So they book a studio, and the comic starts performing wacky musical sketches, none of which sound like hits. So Joe steps in and says, "Eddie, baby, everybody knows you're a funny guy, but if you want a hit record, maybe just dial it back a bit and do a generic song about partying."
So the song Party All the Time by Eddie Murphy becomes a huge hit, and the comedian's ego goes out of control. He soon becomes unbearably high maintenance, and despite Joe's best efforts, he ends up firing him, announcing that he's bored of music and now wants to be a movie star. Once again, Joe is sucked back in time.
So he comes to in a 1970s brothel where he's surrounded by four sex workers, I guess is the politically correct term these days. He's kind of unfazed by this point. He's kind of used to these strange time jumps. So he wanders into the bathroom to check out his face, and in this period he's going to be played by Bill Murray, because we thought Bill Murray would be a good character to wake up in the middle of a fivesome, and not be fazed by it. So
Horace collects him and drives him down to the recording studio to meet his latest singer, a talented R&B singer called Gloria Gaynor. Gloria has recorded a powerful breakup anthem called I Will Survive. Everybody thinks the record has potential, but they just can't find a market for it. Radio is just playing Fleetwood Mac and other rock and blues groups. They're baffled as to how to break the record with the public.
So Joe snaps his fingers and says, "Gloria, baby, I know just who's going to love this record." And we cut to a 70s gay disco where I Will Survive quickly becomes a dance floor sensation, and it shoots to the top of the charts, and Gloria becomes known as the Queen of Disco. Sadly, just a few months later, there's a huge public backlash known as the Disco Sucks movement, in which disco records are burned in the streets and radio refuses to play them, effectively ending Gloria's career, and sending Joe once again into the time vortex.
He wakes up in 1964, where he is introduced to a wide-eyed young boy band called The Wonders. We all know what happens here. So, after their unfortunate breakup, Joe is sent back to the 1950s, where he wakes up as Gary Sinise. He wakes up outside the entrance to a Memphis court venue. He says to Horace, "This is useless. I just can't seem to make it work. I'm going to be trapped in this time loop forever."
And Horace says, "Keep the faith, Joe. Just see this guy. This one might be different. I've got a good feeling about this one." So Joe goes into the Memphis concert venue, where he sees a charismatic, dark-haired young country singer with a very distinctive vocal tone and very flexible hips. After the gig, he goes backstage to introduce himself again and compliments the singer, saying, "Baby, I think you've got real potential."
And the singer replies, "Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much." And Joe smiles directly at camera, and we cut to credits.
And that's the end of That Thing You Manage.
That's pretty awesome. How much research do you guys have to put in?
I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to pop music, so not as much as you'd think. So.
Okay. Yeah, because to me, it just sounded like, oh my God, I recognize everything, but it was that fear of, I might not recognize this one.
Well, a lot of this was just going through, just typing in top one-hit wonders of the 70s, and then just going through just like BuzzFeed's top 100 one-hit wonders or whatever. But yeah, we got there.
You always knew that you were going to end on Elvis?
We had to end it in the 50s, because there's not really any pop stars before the 50s. Elvis was the first real pop and rock sensation. So, yeah, I mean, it might be one of those things that works better as a TV show if it was serialized, where it just could go on forever. But we thought we were going to have like an end point. We thought we'd end with Elvis, because that's the obvious one, because he is like the original pop star, really. So
yeah, that was That Thing You Manage.
Yeah.
I like it. Very, very different from anything I considered.
Good. Thank you. Cool. So, if that's that, should we get to some listener submissions?
Better bloody ad.
Okay, so we had loads for this, actually.
Did we? Oh, good.
We had a lot of reactions to this one, especially on Facebook. It really went down well. There's definitely a lot of people who have fond memories of this. So I'll read through some of my favourites right now.
See, the thing I don't like about cult films is that they very often come up in our podcast. You'll pick a cult film, and then I'll be like, I've never heard of that film. Okay, I'll just give it my best shot. And then it comes to next week, everybody's heard of this film. And I'm like, where have I been? Where have I missed this film?
Yeah, if you're not in the cult, it's like... So, okay, let me pick some of my favourites. So, obviously, there were a lot of plays on the title. Dennis Fanning said, "Those Things We Did." Matt Hanley said, "That Thing You Too."
Yeah.
You know, we always like a bit of a sequel thing that. Bumpers McGee said, "I Know That Thing You Did Last Summer."
I was just thinking that one. Oh, that's a good one.
Drew Miller said, "That Thing We Do in the Shadows."
Oh,
there you go.
good,
The crossover
good.
of a cult vampire movie.
Yeah.
For Tipton Myram said, I know those things you did, Electric Boogaloo. People love a bit of Electric Boogaloo.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew Hedge said, that thing, ? Did it. Matt Malskill said, do the right thing you do. Crossover with do the right thing.
Yep.
Isaiah Hand said, that thing you do in Denver when you're dead. Mike Carey had a legitimate idea. He said, that thing you platoon, which follows the bass player as he makes his way through boot camp and then fights in Vietnam. And maybe some of the other band members appear as USO cameos. So that's good.
That'd be nice.
Stan Ferguson, this is a good one. All these things that I've done. A killer's hit. That could work. Actually, a version of this film that was about the killers. Because the killers are really interesting because aren't they all Mormons or something?
Are they?
Is it the killers who are all like super religious? Even though they're like,
I think that definitely the lead singer was he Mormon, I think?
yeah, I'm pretty sure he's a Mormon, the lead singer of the Killers. Yeah, Mike Flowers, is it? Brandon Flowers. Brandon Flowers. Yeah. Jacob Ben, I think you'll like this one, Harry. Call me by that thing you do.
Fucking hell.
Matthew Hedge. Oh shit! There was that thing that I was supposed to do and I totally forgot.
Oh, you got me mid-beer.
Oh. John Scruffini said that thing you do, as in D-E-U-X, do, too.
Oh, yeah,
so again,
yeah.
a good
Yeah. Ooh,
bit of pun
nice,
work.
actually.
Yeah. Chin T said, still doing that thing, huh? ? And Mike Carey, another one, said, I'm not saying I don't like that thing you do, but could you maybe do something else as well?
Great.
Joe Herman said, that thing you done did. Brian Hunt said, that thing you... Dude, where's my car? Gina Radcliffe said, I have no answer. I just wanted to say, geez Louise, I forgot how cute Tom Everett Scott was in this. I agree. Blokebusters podcast, at Blokebusters. That thing you didn't do. A parallel film following an unsuccessful band annoyed with the success of the Wonders and their attempts to ride on their coattails. They said, imagine the film killing Bono, but with less murder attempts. And finally, We Watch Anything, at We Watch Anything, said, that thing that I know what you did last album. A teen one-hit wonder pop band go to a remote New England fishing town recording studio where they are slowly picked off by a vengeful ex-groupie who they all previously used horribly in one night of debauched post-show mayhem.
Oh, gross.
That's gross and dark, but I can see it. So, you see it? Thanks, guys. There's some interesting ideas there.
Yeah.
And that was that thing you do. So, thank you very much, Julio, for joining us. It's really very appreciated.
Oh, it was a blast.
And once again, thank you very much for being a supporter on Patreon. It really means so much to us that anyone is willing to actually put money down to help our show and to show their appreciation. So, thank you very, very much.
I find it ridiculous because all I'm doing is sharing the voice that's inside my head, and the fact that people think it's a good thing, I don't understand it.
Well, don't queer the deal, Harry. Anyway, but would you like to take this opportunity to tell us again just a little bit about the Contrarians podcast and what you guys do?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's such a pain to describe it because it really sounds more complicated than it is. But I guess to begin with, you guys are familiar with Rotten Tomatoes, right? The
Yes.
website? Okay. So the show comes from the idea that Rotten Tomatoes is not very well understood as a website because their fresh and rotten scores are usually seen as a reflection of the quality of a movie when really it reflects more like the popularity of a movie. And sometimes those two things overlap, but sometimes they don't. And you can find really challenging, interesting movies that get a low rating just because they're not mainstream. But people would go in and see that movie has like a 13% Rotten Tomatoes, and then they would think that, oh, well, this sucks. And really what it could just mean is, oh, this movie's challenging. I might like it anyway. So to use Rotten Tomatoes as a tool to determine which movies you watch, I think it's not a good idea, and I think it shortchanges a lot of interesting movies. So what we do, just to make it fun, is we just pick a movie that has a high rating or a low rating in Rotten Tomatoes, and then we argue for the opposite case. And we do it in a very ridiculous way because the other thing we like to do is just to make fun of critics. And there's a lot of online criticism that, gets through to Rotten Tomatoes or gets, passed around a lot. But really, sometimes it's just like some angry guy typing something about a movie. So we alternate and we'll pick a movie that has a high rating. Like, let's say we did like an episode on Jaws, right? The Steven Spielberg movie about the shark. And it has a really high rating. So we just did an episode where we were just talking about it like we were shocked, that we were offended, that it was like anti-shark propaganda, and that nobody takes when you look at it from the point of view of the shark, the shark was just doing its thing, and then it became harassed and hunted by the man. And then we'll do an episode on a movie that has like a really low score, like we did an episode on Paul Blart Mall Cop, and that one again we just talked about how it was actually a pretty accurate depiction of what it's like to be a retail worker, somebody that works at a mall during the holidays and all that stuff. And then, that's the first half of the show. And then on the second half of the show, we actually tell you how we really feel. And sometimes, like let's say in the case of Jaws, we actually agree it's a great movie. So after spending the first part of the show talking trash about it, we'll say nice things about it and actually talk about how we feel about it. And then, with Paul Blart, it was kind of like the same. We'll pretend that we like it, and then in the second half, which is we call real talk, we tell you, okay, we actually know this is not a good movie at all. But what that does is in the first half, even though we're doing it in jest and we're trying to be funny about it, it forces us to look to a movie through a lens that's different from popular opinion. And you find sometimes that you end up appreciating a movie that you really didn't care for originally, or you end up seeing flaws in a movie that you actually thought was perfect. So, like when we did That Thing You Do, it became clear that, partly because it's set in the 60s, I guess, but it's such a white movie. And then when you actually get the black character is this ridiculous guy at the hotel that's just almost like a cartoon of this super cool, friendly black guy. If it wasn't for the black jazz musicians at the very end, it would actually be problematic, I guess. But it was something that sometimes, like in your Love Actually episode, it's like I can't unlisten to that episode, and all those flaws that you pointed out that were very valid, they're there, and they're going to be there next time I watch the movie.
I'm well aware of this. That's what I bloody hate about that episode.
I make no apologies.
Yeah, so there are times when we've kind of ruined some movies for ourselves, but then by the same token, we've actually learned to appreciate some movies better. My co-host, Alex, he was very resistant to doing Elizabethtown, the Cameron Crowe movie. And after we did it, he was like, you know what? It wasn't that bad. Because we're sitting there trying to force ourselves to say nice things about it. Eventually, we actually find really good things about it. So it's a lot of fun. And I like every 10 episodes, we'll do a gray area episode where we pick a movie that's just halfway in the Rotten Tomatoes meter. So something that's in the 50%, 60% area, where we'll change the format to where one of us will defend it and one of us will attack it, just to spice things up. And also because there's so many great movies that are fun to do that don't match the really high or really low score. So that way we can widen our array of movies, of options. But yeah, we have a lot of fun. We've been doing it for a while. I think we've gotten better at it. Every time that somebody asks me if they should listen to the podcast, like where should they start, I was like, just start with the most recent stuff. As long as it's a movie that you've seen. We recap the movie, so it doesn't matter if you haven't seen it, but obviously you have a lot more fun if you've seen the movie before. But yeah, that's what it is. We're on our 4th year now.
I was actually just listening to your Fantastic Mr. Fox episode yesterday, and I really, really enjoyed it. I liked your how offended you got by the idea that foxes could talk to some humans but not others.
But see, that's one thing that when you're watching the movie, you don't care. Because, I mean, at least if you're like, hey, you like the movie, you don't really stop to, like, disassemble it. And but then when you're looking for its flaws, you're like, wow, this doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, it's a great show. And how can people find you then if they want to check out the Contrarians podcast?
So just look up the Contrarians on iTunes. We're also on SoundCloud. You can go to our website, which is wearethecontrarians.com. All summer long, we're going to do John Travolta movies. We're calling it the Summer of Travolta, and I am so pumped to do it.
Oh, fantastic. Cool. So yeah, do check out the Contrarians podcast. It's a great show. And you can find them at wearethecontrarians.com or by searching for them on iTunes and other podcast platforms. And if you like our show, obviously, you can find Beyond the Box Set on all good podcasting platforms, including iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and Podbean. You can also find us on our website, beyondtheboxset.com, and on most forms of social media, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search Beyond the Box Set, and we should show up. If you like the show, please subscribe, leave a review, or become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/Beyond the Box Set, where we have a lot of really cool incentives, which you can gain access to by contributing as much or as little as you like, as we discussed earlier in the show. And next week, Harry, we have another two-hander again. Mm-hmm. So it's your turn to pick a film. Do you have a film prepared?
I do, yes.
Great. What are you going to subject me to? Okay,
so, John, did you study English?
Did I study English? Yeah, I do have a degree in English literature. I don't like to shout about it, but I do, in fact, yes.
Cool. Did you do English in GCSE in high school?
I have a degree, so yeah, I did also get through that GCSE phase beforehand.
Cool, sure. Were there any books that you studied at all?
Have you been going through my...
No. I'm just.
Well, yeah, I did a lot of the stuff. I did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I did The Handmaid's Tale. I did a lot. Why?
Did you do Of Mice and Men?
Oh, I never did. Wow. Okay. I mean, I've read it, but.
All right. Well, that's our film for next week.
Of Mice and Men. Wow, we're going highbrow for a week. Interesting.
So wait, is that the Gary Sinise, John Malkovich version?
That's the one.
Okay, cool. That's the only one I've seen, because I think there's another one.
Probably there must be other versions. It's such a famous book. Yeah. I don't know. So the Gary Sinise and John Malkovich take on Wow, that's a curveball. Wasn't prepared for that. Interesting. Okay, looking forward to it. Cool. So tune in next week for Of Mice and Men. And Julio, once again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, and I'm sure we'll have you back sometime.
Oh, yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yep. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week. So, bye.
See you later. Say bye, Julio.
Oh, bye.
I am Spartacus!